If you've been in the esoteric or spiritual community for any length of time, I'm sure you've heard much about the dark night of the soul. And today, we're going to talk about what it actually means, starting with St. John of the Cross. The 16th century Spanish mystic wrote Dark Night of the Soul, describing two stages, the dark night of the senses and the dark night of the spirit. The first purifies attachment to physical pleasures and sensory experiences, but the second, and far more terrible, purifies attachment to spiritual experiences themselves. In the dark night of the spirit, God removes all consolation. Prayer becomes dry, lifeless, and meaningless. Meditation produces nothing. Scripture offers no comfort. The sense of God's presence that sustained you vanishes completely, leaving only the void. You haven't sinned. You haven't abandoned practice either. You've actually advanced so far that God begins the final purification, removing your attachment to the feelings, visions, and experiences that kept you subtly self-focused rather than God-focused. The soul experiences this as abandonment and as failure, as losing everything that it gained. John says this is when most people quit. They interpret the darkness as evidence that they're doing something wrong, when actually, they're finally doing something right. Let's dive deeper into the alchemical parallel. Alchemists call this stage the nigredo, or the blackening, when the matter completely putrefies, turns black, and dissolves into chaos. Everything achieved in earlier stages breaks down, the substance rots, death pervades the vessel, and the alchemist watches years of work apparently destroyed. But nigredo is necessary. You can't achieve the white stone, or albedo, or the red stone, rubedo, without first returning to the black prima materia. The perfection built prematurely must be dissolved so genuine perfection can emerge from deeper integration. The alchemical maxim solvit et coagula, dissolve and coagulate. You build and then dissolve what you build and then rebuild on a firmer foundation, each cycle going deeper than the last. The dark night is the solve that precedes the ultimate coagula. Even the green line devouring the sun, the crude material consuming the perfected gold to break it down for true transmutation. This is the dark night. What you thought was enlightenment gets devoured by your remaining unconscious material, forcing that deeper integration. But what do the Kabbalists have to say about all this? Well, Kabbalah describes the abyss, the crossing from the personal Sephiroth down to the supernal Sephiroth above. Between Chesed and Bina lies Da'ath, or the non-Sephira. This is the void where ego must dissolve before you can proceed. Crossing the abyss means letting go of every spiritual attainment, every experience of the divine, and every certainty that you've built thus far. You step into absolute unknowing. Many turn back here because the loss of all reference points feels like annihilation. But the dark night is the abyss. You can't cross while carrying attachments to your spiritual identity, your experiences, or your sense of progress. You must release everything and step into nothing, trusting that beyond the void lies Bina, understanding, but having no guarantee. Kabbalists say those who cross the abyss successfully never speak the same again. They've lost the self that thought it was progressing toward God and discovered they were God all along. But this realization required complete destruction of the seeking self. Even Buddhists describe the exact same experience too. Zen calls this the Great Doubt, the stage where all your koans or all your meditation experiences, all your glimpses of Satori dissolve into profound uncertainty. You lose faith in practice, in teacher, and in enlightenment itself. The dark night in Zen manifests as the apparent meaninglessness of continued practice. You sit in Zazen and nothing happens. No peace, no insight, and no progress. Just sitting in darkness, wondering why you're still doing this when it's clearly producing nothing. But this is exactly when breakthrough becomes possible. When you've exhausted trying to achieve enlightenment and simply continue because there's nothing else to do, enlightenment comes when you stop seeking it. And that dark night is what forces that cessation by making seeking utterly futile. The Zen masters say the great doubt precedes great enlightenment. You must doubt everything, teaching, practice, and Buddha himself before genuine realization cracks open your consciousness. And this is why it's necessary. The dark night destroys spiritual materialism. The subtle ego that collects experiences, attainments, and visions is proof of progress. As long as you're attached to spiritual states, you're still operating from ego-seeking reward. God withdraws consolation to reveal whether you love God or love the feelings that God gives you. The dark night asks, will you continue when there's no payoff, no experience, and no sense of presence? Can you love the divine when the divine feels entirely absent? This purification is a surgical one, removing the self-centeredness from spirituality itself. You thought you'd transcended ego through spiritual practice, but you'd just given ego new objects to grasp. The dark night removes those objects until only naked faith remains. Every mystical tradition recognizes this because every genuine path must confront the same problem. The self that seeks enlightenment must be destroyed before true enlightenment occurs. And that destruction feels like losing everything because from ego's perspective, it is losing everything. Now for the emergence. St. John of the Cross says those who endure the dark night emerge transformed, united with God not through experiences but through naked being. They've lost attachment to consolation and found God in the void itself. The alchemist who survives the Nigredo produces the philosopher's stone, consciousness so integrated that it can't be dissolved further, and so stable that it remains itself through all transformations. The Kabbalist who crosses the abyss discovers Bina, understanding that doesn't come from accumulating knowledge but from being emptied completely and refilled with divine comprehension. The Zen student who persists through great doubt experiences the great enlightenment, the sudden recognition that seeking and finding were always the same, that samsara and nirvana are one, and that nothing was ever lost because there was never anything to lose in the first place. And this is why it matters. The Dark Night teaches that spiritual crisis is often spiritual progress. When everything falls apart, when practice feels dead, and when God seems absent, this might not actually be regression, but the deepest purification occurring. It warns against judging spiritual progress by feelings or experiences too. The Dark Night deliberately removes these to reveal what's beneath them. If you quit when consolation withdraws, you quit at the threshold of transformation. It proves every tradition discovers the exact same pattern because this pattern is how consciousness transforms at the deepest level, through death and resurrection, dissolution and reconstitution, the void that precedes all fullness. Modern spirituality often skips this entirely, focusing on peak experiences, positive feelings, and instant enlightenment. But every authentic path knows, before the final union comes the dark night, where everything you built gets destroyed, and your willingness to continue through that darkness is what determines whether you achieve a genuine transformation or just collect spiritual experiences that leave the ego intact. So if you want more mystical teachings and esoteric wisdom, make sure to like the video, let me know what you think in the comments below, and follow for more deep dives like this. Till next time, guys.